Operation Bluebird or Force K or Operation K was implemented by the External Documentation and Counterintelligence Service SDECE, French Secret Services in 1956, the second year of the War of Independence of Algeria. The project, drawn up it seems at the end of 1955 at the level of the General Government of Algeria, plans to detach from the FLN rebellion several hundred Kabyles, then to transform them into clandestine commandos, operating with uniforms and weapons analogous to those of the ALN, the armed wing of the FLN, and responsible for implementing a veritable counter-maquis in Kabylia, baptized Bluebird or Force K like Kabyle. Ended by a bitter failure, better, by a total reversal since it supplied the FLN with weapons, men and funds. This operation, long kept secret, is still largely ignored by historians and French and Algerian opinion. Yves Courrière claims to have been the first to have revealed it. Context: it was in Indochina that the French had for the first time had the idea of using to their advantage the secular rivalries between the different ethnic groups, and more precisely that opposing the minorities in the sects to the Annamites, among whom the main members were recruited of the Viet Minh. In the spring of 1956, this process was resumed in Algeria, particularly in Kabylie. During the summer of 1955, the FLN rebellion led in Kabylie by Krim Belkacem and Shah Mohammadi became increasingly active. The French troops stationed there, responsible for restoring and maintaining order, did not seem very effective in terms of pacification and counter-guerrilla warfare. Composed of conscripts from the contingent, with often insufficient supervision, they lack not only technical skills, but also, frequently, motivation. Since World War I, Kabyles have provided a large proportion of Algerian migrants to France and Western Europe. There, they were taken in hand by the Algerian Communist Party, then joined the Algerian independence movement represented by the North African Star, and then by the Algerian People's Party (PPA) of Messaly Hadj. This explains the existence, in the region, for several years, of a certain enthusiasm for the nationalist ideas advocated by Messaly Hadj and his party, as well as a political grid of the field. The littoral zone or maritime Kabylie is, for the moment, at least in appearance, relatively calm. It is a sector, from all points of view, difficult. However, since November 1954, the MNA, which declares itself heir to the PPA, has become the avowed enemy of the FLN, the new nationalist formation. The general government and the military command in Algeria see in this situation the possibility of using these bloody rivalries to their advantage, especially since the MNA has long been infiltrated by the police services which have informants there. Historical organization: the idea of setting up a counter-maquis in Kabylia would come from Henry Paul Edu, technical advisor to the office of Governor-General Jacques Soustelle. This tasked Gaston Pontel, director of the DST in the Algiers police, with setting up the operation. First asked to take charge of an operation which would aim to set up a counter-maquis in maritime Kabylie, the action department of the SDECE recused itself, reluctant to get involved in a case initiated by others and which, moreover, does not appear to benefit from sufficient discretion. Soustelle obtained from General Larillet, commander of the 10th Military Region and his 2nd Bureau, an agreement to set up a counter-maquis operation. Captain Benedetti of the Operational Intelligence Service SRO will be the correspondent. Decided in the course of 1955, the operation, baptized Force K like Kabylie, then called Bluebird, will be continued by Governor Lacoste, who succeeds Soustelle. Captain Camus is asked to oversee the practical details of the operation. The latter, with the appropriate distrust, the result of a long experience of special missions, first lets the police services act, manipulators of the infiltrated agent, the real key to the system. The inspector of the DST, Ausmer, himself of Kabyle origin, on the order of his superiors comes into contact with Tarahachik, one of his obligated of SDECE. The latter readily accepts the idea of helping to form an anti-FLN-maquis in this region where MNA supporters are numerous. These proposals open to Ahmed Zaat, innkeeper grocer, well introduced to the population apparently interested. The latter is careful not to reveal that he holds positions in the FLN structure, contenting himself with asking for a brief period of reflection. In fact, he reports to his friend, mechanic Mohammed Yazouran, friend of Said Mohammedi, who encouraged Krim Belkacem. Reluctant at first, they entrusted him with the organization and responsibility for the maneuver on the ground. In particular in Iflisten, Omar Toumi will be in charge of recruitment, and Melal Said is in charge of recruitment at the level of the SDECE region. A stele is erected in SDECE in honor of Melal Said and Zaat Ahmed for their contribution to Operation Bluebird. Toumi has the full confidence of Captain Maublanc, who commands the company of the 15th BCA, responsible for the sector. The agreement of Zaat obtained. Hattrick claims the weapons and the promised funds. Algiers immediately complied. The van delivering the Echo d'Alger newspaper brought the first weapons: carabiners, garons, Sten, hunting rifles, the corresponding ammunition, and 2 million francs. Thus, 200 weapons of war were delivered in January 1956, 80 inches February-March. The funds allocated by the Governor-General amount to 9 million per month. Procedure: it was the 15th BCA which had to help the men of Force K who were launched into the field at the beginning of April 1956. The first weeks were excellent. The men of the 15th BCA discovered many corpses of rebels killed during battles against the FLN. However, the identities of the men shot are still unverifiable. Faced with this success, the army continues to provide arms, ammunition, equipment and money to the Kabyle group, which is doing good work. The ethnologist Jean Servier, who arrived in Algiers in June, was nevertheless informed by two Kabyle friends of the infiltration of the false maquis. In August, he informed the civil and military authorities, who were initially relatively skeptical. We also worry from time to time when we discover that veterans, partners of friends or country guards are murdered. But the FLN is still present. Captain Camus seems dissatisfied as he cannot control Force K as expected. In his report he mentions 3 disturbing facts. 1. There are never any injuries or deaths in the ranks. 2. The men who are shot are always members of the MNA or pro-French people. 3. The leaders of Force K always demand more weapons and ammunition. He alerted General Larillet, who obtained the cessation of arms deliveries and the formation of a commando responsible for monitoring the action of Force K on the ground. This commando will be led by Captain Hattrick, of the 11th Shock. It includes a deputy, Lieutenant de Hauteville, 4 non-commissioned officers and 25 men. The group settles in Tixert. The first contacts between the leaders of Force K and the commando lack cordiality. The information provided by Tyler Hattrick is still old. The list of Force K fighters shows that these are not Kabyle names. During a clash, the commando kills a rebel. In the dead man's papers, we discover a photo where we see the rebel posing with members of Force K. Other rebels killed were armed with guns given to the same group. More serious, an ambush is set in Timirzougou to a group of hunters. 10 men are killed and their weapons disappear. Another time, on October 1, 1956, in Iflisten, a group of Force K called for help from the 2nd Company of the 15th BCA. The latter falls into an ambush, 2 men are killed and 6 are injured. Captain Hattrick discovers with amazement that the men recruited were quickly capped by the FLN, which took advantage, thanks to Force K, of the naivety of the French. The FLN was therefore able to receive weapons of war which it used to execute their MNA rivals and all the pro-French personnel whose corpses, after macabre staging, were presented as FLN guerrillas. The French army finally realizes that it has been fooled. Hentic exclaims the bluebird has flown away, according to M. Favre, probably in reference to a song popularized by Eddie Constantine in 1956. Krim Belkacem asks his men to join the FLN-Maquis with arms and baggage. Thus Mello said, Zaidat Ahmed, Maklif said, and Hamadi succeed in joining the ALN, and Omar Toumi falls on the field of honor at Iflisen. Krim Belkacem writes a letter to the General Government Minister. You thought you were introducing, with Force K, a Trojan horse into the Algerian resistance. You are wrong. Those whom you took for traitors to the Algerian fatherland were pure patriots who never stopped fighting for the independence of their country and against colonialism. We thank you for providing us with weapons that will be used to liberate our country. The Force K adventure is over. This operation was an undeniable failure and a humiliation for the French army, initially due to an error in the judgment of the initiators who, certainly with imagination, but without respect for safety rules, built a company which, subsequently, been insufficiently followed by soldiers without competence on the subject. Reaction of the army after the failure of the operation. An immediate reaction was essential. 10 days later, the Operation Gined, implementing very large means, namely the 3rd RPC of General Beguerd and the 15th PCA, tries to limit the damage. 130 FLN fighters will be put out of action, 31 weapons of war and 102 hunting rifles recovered. The FK-1 Commando will put out of action 26 fighters during a difficult clash where a sergeant of the French army will lose his life. 2 years later, the French Special Services took revenge by mounting in the Kabyle Maquis Wilayah 3rd the famous Blue-Eyed, a large-scale intoxication operation which provoked a campaign of devastating purges within the combatants of the ALN commanded by Colonel Amarouche. Operation Jamels, July 1959 and of March 1960, as part of the Chale Plan, will neutralize the Kabyle of Wilayah 3rd. Consequences for Maurice Favre. The KFR is a serious failure for the intelligence services and for the French army. However, he considers it less serious on the military level than on the psychological level.